Good morning, everybody. We are excited to be here in this virtual world with you all. We have John Paul Caponigro and Paul Caponigro with us. We're going to be having a little chat today in conjunction with our exhibition at Obscura Gallery. We are doing an exhibition called Two Generations, which was, my understanding, born about 30 years ago. John Paul had put together one of the first Two Generations exhibitions, and there's been a few iterations since, and we are very excited to have our own 24, actually there's probably more than 24 photographs in this exhibition. And so we decided to have an online chat and go a little deeper. I'm sure many of you know Paul Caponigro, but I'm going to give you a little quick, brief intro. Paul is one of the most revered 20th century photographers in the realm of nature photography, fine art, landscape photography, and black and white gelatin silver printing as well. And I would say I think we've got over 20 books by you, Paul. I can't even count all of the books you've published.
Don't ask me, I don't know.
But there's well over 20, I know that for sure. And this is the third exhibition that I've done with Paul. The first one, we started working together in 2020. And then I went out to go see Paul to put together a Polaroid exhibition that we did just a year or so ago. And that's when I met John Paul. And I was fortunate enough to meet John Paul in his photography studio, which kind of blew my mind. And we all probably know John Paul as working, a legend in his own right, working in digital printing and digital color photography, and has advised and basically started digital photography with Adobe and Epson and many other major companies. And while these two artists are legends in their own right, they work very differently, but they also have an incredible thread, a spiritual thread, I would say, that runs through their work in how they react to nature and find nature to be most revered through their photography. So I am going to pass it on to you guys, and we can go back and forth a little later. We're going to have some Q&A here towards the end. So please do put any questions you have in the chat, and I will do my best to get to all of them. It just depends how many we have. But if you have questions, please put them in throughout, and we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. And it was great to be able to be out there in your space and enjoy the works. I always love seeing our work through other people's eyes, the kinds of pairs, like what's behind you on the wall, the way things are sequenced, the different chemistries that are set up between prints. You did a beautiful job with that in your space. Space is gorgeous. So it's been such a pleasure to work with you on this, and I look forward to other events in the future.
Absolutely.
Rather than jump right into conversation, I thought we would start with images.
Fine with me.
You're gonna have to read a little bit, Pop. You
I like images.
Yeah, we love images, right? So it makes a darn many of them. So, do you remember how we did this, Pop? Last time we, hey, if the guy can only there we go. So we'll show some images and read some quotes for you. If we go a little bit fast, I don't think we will. You can review any of this in the ebook that we've created for you. All of these quotes and images are with the free ebook that we promised. If you haven't downloaded that yet, you can. We'll send you a follow-up email with many resources as well. So lots of ways to get to this. Let's get straight to the images. Don't read that. Boo. Do read that, and let me get this out of the way. All right.
Is that mine?
That's yours.
And I have to read that?
Yeah.
Why? I know it. At times, I make photographs for the sheer magic of its process and the good feeling about the very stuff needed. Light, chemical combinations, some imperceptible forces at work behind the scene. I am part of the drama which takes the guise of photography. That's a good statement.
Not bad, Pop.
Made in our front yard
That's right.
when we were living in Connecticut. I often see the materials of photography as being a type of terrain. Emulsions, liquid developers, silver salts, and fixers interact, and I construct a landscape that I need to explore in my mind's eye if I am to make it manifest as an artful image in silver. Wow, did I say that?
Yeah. You're wordy. It's a beautiful statement. It's one of my favorite pictures.
That's a very early one.
Mm.
I was good very early.
You're still not bad, right?
One needs to be still enough, observant enough, and aware enough to recognize the life of the materials to be able to hear through the eyes.
Mm. Mm.
What does that mean?
I'm going to ask you that. I hope you have an answer. We'll come back to that.
No,
You want to do it now?
it's here now.
Oh, yeah. Mr. Improvisation. You want to stop this
Be
and
able
have
to
a little
hear-
conversation?
To be able to hear through the eyes means we see things through the physical eyes, but the internal eyes is where the life of the images come into being.
Hmm.
So we hear. I call it hearing through the eyes. It's an internal hearing.
Hmm.
The key is to not let the camera, which depicts nature in so much detail, reveal just what the eye picks up, but what the heart picks up as well. That's pretty close to what I just said.
Mm-hmm.
Like that image.
I have it right behind me.
It's been a favorite for many years.
Mm-hmm.
No, wait a minute. All my pictures are my favorites. Photography is a medium, a language through which I might come to experience directly, live more closely with the interactions between myself and nature. And that's the way it's been for many, many, many years. Since we started.
That was taken in Santa Fe, that image, correct?
It was 1980. I know the year.
Not bad.
Photography's potential as a great image maker and communicator is really no different from the same potential in the best poetry where familiar everyday words placed within a special context can soar above the intellect and touch subtle reality in a unique way. Good luck, everybody, on that one. Difficult to fly. The only way a work of art can become great is for one to acknowledge that it doesn't belong to anybody. The greatness is the constantly giving back, coming to an acknowledgement of the source. Some of my photographs have always been a mystery to me in terms of how I arrived at them. All of them still are. Keep alive the fact that a mystery has come into existence and that a physical being serves as a house for this mystery. Ouch, that's a hard job. The influence of mystery is the greatest of influences. And all that I have achieved are these dreams locked in silver. Thinking of them as dreams is closer to the process of actually making them. One needs to get internal in order to catch the essential, which is buried in the external.
A photograph is an invitation to look, and to look at looking. Looking and seeing are two different things. How do we know what we know? Is seeing believing? Is believing seeing? Listen carefully. The ways we speak about things is revealing. Art is a process of discovery. Questions guide our ways. It takes asking many questions from many perspectives to truly understand something. A good question offers many answers. It's possible to look in more than one way simultaneously. Surfaces reveal and conceal. Capturing the light reflected off things is different than being captured by them. Different people can photograph the same things with the same tools and create such different images. We are the strongest filter we can place on any lens. We always point the lens both outward and inward. A way of seeing is a way of being. The frame frames a frame of mind.
Your thoughts have a few subtle edges.
Thank you, Bob.
We'll invite the audience into those and beyond that edge.
It's a journey, isn't it?
It is a journey. It's a journey. And we're already there, and most of us don't know it.
My work is about the perception of nature and the nature of perception. The two are deeply interrelated. Making photographs can be a way of having a conversation with nature, and so with ourselves.
I had a teacher that told me, whenever you go anywhere, make sure you take yourself with you.
Have you ever been able to do otherwise?
You'd be surprised. Be surprised how many of us get left home.
We are not apart from nature. We are a part of nature.
That's a very striking photo, John Paul. I have not seen that one.
Yeah, and I think Stone had gotten it in my head there. I found it in Green. I wonder who my influences are.
Oh.
any rate.
See, that was your own influence.
Yeah, well, I definitely did something my own with it.
You're comparing those ice blobs with stones, but that's not an influence. That's seeing.
That's seen.
You were seeing at that time. And then you were reminded that you'd seen something like it. That's not an influence.
What is it?
I don't care what you call it. Being reminded of. It's association.
It is association. And we make very different associations. And sometimes the language helps us understand not only what's out there, but what's in here and what we're bringing to it. So I think the language is important.
It helps once in a while.
And it can get in the way too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Most of the time.
Most of the time.
Yeah, my motto is shut up and do it.
Shut up and click the shutter. That should be a good one for you.
Shut up and click.
And I've heard photographers resist making statements about their work and then complain about the comments other people make about their work because somebody's inevitably going to talk about it. And they say their pictures are silent, but they always put titles on it. And I rarely see an image without text surrounding it. Sometimes the text is invisible, it's just breath, but it's still text. So I think there's this natural flow back and forth. And I think you're right. There are times where one needs to be silent and turn it off. And it's not always easy. It takes a little practice. But
Right. Practice, hard work.
what do you call meditation a practice?
Meditation's a good word. It puts the problem before you and possibly a means to get there. Very difficult to be where you already are if you are aware that you're close to your source. Seeking the source is the main problem. Finding ways to get there is the work.
So I had a fun event at the opening. I had just told a story about one of my students remarking during a photo shoot, hey, did you get the picture? And if you get the picture, what did you bring to the picture? And then she walks into the gallery just after that. We were just talking about you. It was a lot of fun. I think we bring a lot of association, of language, emotion, reactions. And I think it's useful to become aware of what we're bringing to the picture. In part, that's what helps make our work personal and authentic. And I think also that we're burdened by a culture. We've been given a language that describes nature as it. We don't have a word for nature, we. And that lack of a word leads us to be thinking about it as a commodity, and we reflect that back on ourselves. We're just this, we hope there's a ghost in this machine, maybe we're just the machine. So then we become a commodity. And it's one of the reasons I've turned to writing and writing more creatively, away from the essay, but more creative nonfiction and poetry, to highlight the language that we bring to every experience, including looking at a photograph. We're responsible for the language that we bring to it, but we're not always aware of it, and we're not always empowered by it. So use it when it helps, use it to help.
You're putting up a good fight by chattering about it. You're delaying the process. So I have a question for you. I know your work. I've been watching it develop. Has there ever been a time that you were doubtful about continuing with that creative process?
No.
I knew you would answer that, but I brought it up to indicate that our creative source never has a doubt. It never has a doubt. And unfortunately, it covers it with too many words and delays the process by such process. But that beginning I saw in you when you were just a couple of years old. The impulse to create is already there. You picked up a crayon and drew something on the wall. And that's been alive in you for many, many years. And what I want to do is to point out that impulse is our basic influence, our real influence. And I'm glad to see you still got it.
Back
In
at you.
fact, I'm glad I still have it.
Exactly. Yeah, you know, as a teacher who has taught thousands of people, I have to find words to help people find their way.
I do feel sorry for you.
No, it's one thing to just say, meditate, be there, just do it. It's another thing to do it. And sometimes you need some help along the way, some bridges. It's not a substitute for the experience, but it can be a way of cultivating.
I can't disagree with you. There are people that want to find a closer contact with themselves, and speaking about it, adding your own experience can be of great help.
Yeah. So a lot of us don't love highfalutin art speak. There's some obfuscation we endeavor to eschew. We try and keep it simple.
Helps.
On the other hand, I've seen some beautiful responses, like Keats' Ode to a Grecian Urn. He's made art from another piece of art with words. He's turned music for the eyes into music for the ears. And the two work off each other in this fabulous synergy. Suddenly I see that Grecian urn. I listen to that Grecian urn differently. So I think it's interesting in many ways what we're doing here kind of extends our relationship with our work, our relationship, and perhaps for other people, there may be echoes that ring when they look at our images afterwards because they've had this unique experience. We didn't do it quite the same way the last time.
Where do we have to be able to listen to that creation and the urn?
Well, if you can't tell me, can you show me?
I can point there.
Mm-hmm.
Has to come from the heart. The listening, the hearing, the perceiving of it. It needs to be in the heart. And we allow that by being very simple, by being open, by being responsive. Then the heart is ready to pick up the message and the essentials and hand them to you. Hand them to the bartender upstairs, the shaker of cocktails.
So does art just happen and we get out of the way, or are there ways of cultivating that receptivity, that ability to listen?
Well, the first part of the question, we're already mixed in with it. We're already there. We're already subject to all of the influences out there. The second part, you need to have enough interest and, well, let's say, realize and appreciate the beauty of what's there to pick up a medium, to state it, and possibly pass it on. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, Caponigro still polishes silver.
Let's talk a little bit about music. You've been an accomplished pianist most of your life, and music has often been a great metaphor and a source of inspiration for you. How would you describe its importance in your life, in your creative process?
The visual world, the outside world, comes through the eyes, the physical eyes. Most often is, let's say, interrupted by the intellect, the brain up in the head. Music really comes through the ears as sound, not as a visual impediment. Comes through the ears and goes directly to the heart without being interrupted by any intellectual process. It's that aspect that is so valuable for any artist to grasp and try to use. So being receptive to sound is already being open. I still like to play piano. And when photography came and said, well, you can't just be a goddamn pianist, you got to be something else. We, as life, want you to be a photographer as well. So I had to find a way to, well, let's say integrate the two of them or find a way to live with both. And I invented this little idea that on the keyboard of the piano, there's a note from do up to a higher pitch of another do. And there's a sequence of 8 tones. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. In the photographic print, there's been a gentleman named Ansel Adams who invented so-called zone system. He thinks of the zones as individual tonalities on the photographic paper. So he invented the zone system, thinking that from black to white, he has separated 8 separate tones: black, nearly black, gray, higher gray, near white, white, etc. So there's a scale that he made on the photographic paper, and I relate it to the scale on the keyboard of the piano. Each scale, I try to relate to one another. So when I see a tonality of a gray on a gray photographic silver print, I as if hear a sound that it relates to.
Is that a metaphor, or do you actually hear the sound?
You know, hearing, most real hearing takes place in silence. So I can't really describe it to you, otherwise it sullies it with trying to put it into the real world for others to understand.
Yeah, I think you're talking back to that heart, that emotion, that intuitive understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So being there means being as quiet as possible and sing along with the tonalities on the photographic paper.
Nice. Yeah. You know, Goethe had a similar assigning of colors to specific notes.
Oh.
He was very involved in music as well as the writing and the science. And so C was a bright yellow and G was an orange. And he had this whole system kind of worked out. Ultimately, it's just an interesting metaphor. I think this relationship between color, and I consider black and white color, in part because of you. We can get back to that in a second. Color and sound are both what our bodies do with vibration out there. And so I think of this as an artful vibration, that it's a different kind of music for the eyes, music for the ears, but it's really an expressive vibration. And somehow when we're creating it, we get into the things that we create. And so we can listen to ourselves, meeting the universe, as if there's a difference.
We get into the things that we create. What do you mean by we get into?
I mean, you leave a little piece of yourself in the print that you make back here. And somehow your essence, your quality. You know, when you listen to one musician, when Jarrett sits down at the keyboard and plays Bach, you know it's Jarrett playing. So we could ask ourselves the same kinds of questions when Caponigro creates these tones in this rock wall. How do we know it's Caponigro? But I loved that Bill Clift paid you a very fine compliment. He loves the print that's in Jennifer's gallery. And if she doesn't sell it, I want to ask you to put it into the 2 Generation show that's going to tour.
All right.
Because he's right. There's a softer melodic quality to that print. It's an extraordinary print. And you do know that you printed that in a way that nobody else could. Now, we still talk about the negative as the score and the print being the performance. Thank you, Ansel. Right?
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to ask, when do we know that Bach is being played by Gieseking? Bach is being played by, pick your favorite, Horowitz? Because of the individual performer's sensibility, it gets into even the same score. So fascinating that we can leave some of ourselves.
Well, we need to be open, again, sensitive to the characteristics, qualities of those outside impressions coming from those individuals. But it's a rather unique gift for anyone to have the perception of who or what is the quality of that individual playing that particular piece.
And isn't that a gift for ourselves when we make our own work? Because sometimes we surprise ourselves. So I didn't know I had that in me.
Oh, do you do that?
All the time, don't you? Isn't that one of the reasons you do
it? I'll think about that.
I'm still trying to figure me out.
Stop that.
No.
Stop that and be there.
That's part of figuring it out.
Well,
yeah, I got to make sure that I'm here and not the culture that I inherited or the role I'm supposed to play.
That is a good approach. That is a good defense against all the barrage that comes at you as you are trying to be a creative assistant to the creative impulse.
Music. Do you want to talk about influences or you want to avoid them?
I don't mind talking about it. It annoys me. But I mean, it's there in a certain way. But my feeling is that influence is incessant. And so I need to carry a shovel to push it away from me.
So I'm gonna start in with a short little story. Do you remember our dear friend Fergus Burke?
I do.
And the time that we visited him in 1984.
You've got a good memory.
Well, you were leading workshops. I was assisting you in Ireland, and then we toured the rest of the British Isles and went down into...
now I remember.
Right? It was a great, wonderful kind of semester off for me.
We took you out of school and used your tuition money to do it.
It was fabulous education. Couldn't have gotten that kind of thing. So we walk into Fergus's house. Unfortunately, he no longer has the minor bird. But we walk into his house. So you're going into the family business, are you? So who are your influences? Bosch, Blake. No, photographers. Jerry Olsman. No, pick another. He doesn't count. This was before Photoshop. It was quite interesting, but he was trying to figure out where I was going with it through my influences. And we do carry some influences, and it was fascinating to hear in front of that same rock wall print, somebody said Duchamp. Now we often think of New Descending Staircase when we look at that image. It's just one of the many associations that we bring. Mm-hmm. And I know that you've been influenced by many different things, not just the ancient cultures that you photograph, like the megalithic monuments, also the Egyptian artifacts, which kind of fueled an internal search. You've mentioned Paul Klee many times, and I see it when I see a certain icy abstraction. So,
whatever is essential to those artists, what they use to arrive at what they presented to me in the form of a visual piece of information, it's the essential in that artist that is the influence. So Ansel gave me a certain number of numbers. Minor White gave me the idea of going deeper and not just remaining on the surface and seeing what a thing is. He put the idea across that you can see a thing for what it is, not only for what it is, but for what else it is. That allows a lot more to come in, right. And a lot more people to come in, because how it's seen is always shaped by who is seeing it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And Paul Strand, a strong influence for how strong his work is. The Westons, Edward Weston, his love, his very deep love of the work, sits there on the surface of his prints. I remember seeing a photograph made at a certain place in Yosemite, photographs made by Ansel Adams, one by Edward Weston, same point of view. He was standing on the same shore, looking across the lake to the mountains and beyond. And I looked at the Ansel photograph, and it was a surface. where his tones and his spaces were stacked one on top of the other. And then I looked at Edward Weston's photograph, and it was all space. As soon as I went to the edge of the print, it brought me in and brought me right into the space and to the mountaintop. So the stacking of tones, Ansel Adams' rather unfortunate place, and the entering of a space by, like Edward Weston can do. I thought that was fascinating.
It is fascinating. It's one of the reasons I got into photography. And I had a similar experience with you. You remember that dead calf we found on the shores of the western coast of Ireland?
Oh, yes.
All right. And you said, it's too far to carry my camera, so I carried your camera for you. And we set up, and I photographed the whole calf, and you photographed just the lower part of it. And I liked yours so much better. It was a really neat moment, and also just that our sensibilities got into this machine. Like everybody's got the same machine, but they do such different things with it. So somehow that ghost does get in there.
Do you remember the title I gave that image?
Pan ascending.
It's the lower half of the calf or whatever it was, and it's a vertical image, and it's as if the whatever that object is, these legs, whose legs and part of a body are going up and out of.
It just dissolves into the sand. It's almost becoming.
I got poetic by calling him Pan, as a part of the old pagan religion.
We won't tell anybody you used words.
Pan ascending. That was a pretty good title.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite images, favorite prints, and also just a wonderful teaching opportunity, but also highlighted this amazing ability to find ourselves in the images that we make.
Never would have got it if you hadn't carried my camera down to
Hey, I'm glad I did. So I think we really do find ourselves in the things that we collect, the things we surround ourselves with, or just the images that we take into our heart, or the stories that we remember. It's a kind of a self-portrait, and thank you for sharing some of yours. Before we turn it over to questions, help me celebrate the print. Why are prints? What do you love so much about prints?
Well, primarily, they bring me back to the original experience of being at that place where nature offered me what was there to do something with it. And I would say that my own, I go out and I go to photograph, but I don't go out to capture, you might say. I go out to see. So when nature presents something, I'm grateful for it taking my attention to certain aspects of that landscape and making an image.
Of all the negatives we make, or the exposures that we make, we come to a few select and say these are the treasured moments that we've created.
Basically, yes, we do have that aspect of prejudice about ourselves. But I feel like the old woman in the shoe who had so many children she didn't know what to do. I'm the old photographer who has so many negatives, but he loves them all.
Would you ever go photograph without film?
We do that every day.
Yeah, but you don't lug your camera around.
I don't want your point, going out without film.
No, my point is sometimes it's really just a matter of having the experience and of being there, and that the image is wonderful to hold on to, but without the essential experience, doesn't matter.
I suppose I don't know how it works. I maybe influenced myself. Those first interactions with nature and realizing I could take that nature back with me and I could share it with others. That has influenced my approach. And even if I don't have a camera, I see.
Hmm.
So my eye and my heart are always working to interact with nature. And if I don't bring anything back in particular, next time, nature is abundant.
Can you turn it off? Would you ever want to? The seeing, the listening.
I'm not sure I could turn it off, and I never would want to.
Mm.
And that was a question that I had asked you. Where does that come from? Has it ever stopped on you? And you gave the right answer. It had a beginning already established, and you stayed with it. I had to take the crayons out of your hands to stop you drawing on the wallpaper.
Tell that story later. So Jennifer, I had a question for you. What's it been like putting these two bodies of work together, sequencing them on the walls? You've been in your space, the space you created with the images, longer than anybody else. What's it like living with that work? What's your experience been?
Oh, it's such a treat. I mean, if I could just live with this show, like move it to my home or something, I would be perfectly happy for the rest of my life. I really had a blast putting this show together. I would say we started this conversation with photographs about a year ago, as far as starting to think about it. And there were more images that I wanted to put in the show than are in it, but the ones I edited out, I only did so because I wanted the work in the show to have a conversation. So there are some images of Paul's or of yours that I absolutely love, but I didn't know how to make it have that conversation. And it really was about a conversation. It wasn't like the best of, John Paul and Paul. It was like the conversation between images as they hang on the wall. So when we have narrowed it down to about 24 images and I laid them all out, well, first I put them together in the catalog, which was a lot easier because they're all the same size and they're face to face on a page. And it's just a little simpler to lay images out in that format. But then when I had them all framed up, and I think I had said this at your talk the other day at the reception, I initially wanted to frame yours in a different frame, like a light oak frame, because I love color work in that type of frame. But then as I really thought through the curating process, how was I going to hang them? How were they going to, I didn't want someone to be distracted by the frame. I wanted the viewers to really look at the images. So then I decided that we would frame them all in black so that there was no distraction. And then once they were all framed and I laid them out on the floor, I had to spend a good 2 days before I actually got them up on the wall. It was a little challenging in the sense that I thought I knew what I was doing with the catalog, but then with the work on the wall, it just became, which I love, a challenge. And I absolutely love that challenge. Curating is one of my favorite things that I do. So,
Interject.
of course.
To thank you for your ability and your perception of the individual works, to be able to see the individuals and how they work together.
Thank you.
That is from your special perception of what is in the images. That is how you can relate them.
And I wish you can see it, Paul. And we do have a virtual exhibition tour that maybe John Paul can show you, where you can actually see the show virtually. So there's that too, because I would really love you to be able to see some of these conversations. I love the show. And I'm so glad it's up for another month and a half, 2 months almost. At this point, I feel it's a gem. I'm very honored to have both of your work on the wall, and I feel just like, yeah, it's a treat.
Thank you for a wonderful space, wonderful job, and neat experience. Yeah,
absolutely. We have some interesting questions. It's funny because some of them have already been answered at this point. People put them earlier, and I've been keeping an eye on them. And some of them, you guys did a very good job of being thorough in your discussions. So, but something I think that seems to be a common question, and it's almost a two-part question, but you guys were just touching upon it when in your last conversation a moment ago, and it was, do you feel the satisfaction of the image as much as you feel the satisfaction of taking the picture, clicking the shutter, making the picture? Is there a separation between those two? Is it you get the print in your hand and it's done and you feel like that's where you feel the most satisfaction? Or is it in the actual moment of silence, like you said, you speak of, Paul, taking the picture?
For me, it's in the process of the doing, of the discovering, being with the materials, both the technical materials and what nature offers as materials. That's where it starts and that's where it hangs out. I don't really separate that print that's on the wall from where I had to go in the darkroom to get that print where it is. So it's still alive. It continues to flow between the very process itself of creating and the object that finalized and presented to whoever gets to look at it.
How about you, John Paul?
For me, they're very different experiences. They're separate stages on a continuum. If I had to choose, and thank God I don't, I would just want to be out there. I'm thinking of, I showed an aerial photograph of Namibian dunes. Never would I ever trade one of the prints for being up there for 3 hours, feeling like a bird in an illuminated desert that felt like it was breathing. And I knew that was going to be such a short, brief moment. It was so special that I had to get quiet and just be there, just watch, just keep shooting, just keep breathing. So for me, photography is a passport to go to these wild places. And it's not just the wild places out there, it's the wild places in here too, and to find connection. That's the primary. Then I feel like I have to do honor to that by deciding which ones really speak to me, which ones will I print, and when I make the print, what more am I learning about what happened? Because the photograph is always in the past. And then as you went through putting together a catalog and an exhibit, we reconsider it. If the work is good, we have other insights about how it's connected to other moments. And one of my favorites is, oh, there's more to do. I've got to get back out there. So I think of them as separate opportunities for different kinds of insight. I've never had a print take my breath away, but I've never had a print take my breath away like flying in that helicopter or like floating through an iceberg graveyard. And there's something about moving my body through nature moving through nature that is, you said spiritual early, I would consider it a spiritual experience. Let's leave religion out of it. We're all spiritual. We have that dimension, and I feel lit up when I'm out there in it and really present.
Along those lines, another major question that seems to come up is, Paul, I know you've worked in color. I have a few of your color prints in the gallery. But that was very brief. I mean, you basically chose black and white as your medium. And John Paul, I don't think I've ever seen black and white work of yours. I've seen subdued color. Can you guys speak to this decision that you've made?
You want to start? You want me to start?
You start.
So I'm a kid in his darkroom and I'm saying, Dad, why are you using all these different papers and these different developers? And he says, well, let me show you. And to see how this paper is a little warmer, and to see how this developer
makes it cooler.
Makes it cooler, sure. And you see how that changes the emotion and the way that the space is realized? Because not all blacks are created equally. There are all these different blacks, there are all these different grays, there are all these different whites. And from that moment on, I never thought of black and white as anything other than color. So I got very interested in these semi-neutral images, like the one that's behind you, the one that's behind me. In comparison to the very saturated print that's behind your head right now, it's pretty neutral. You look at it in comparison to Dad's leaf, it's got color. Well, how much color? So for me, it's just a spectrum. And probably the reason you haven't found the more neutral images is there is one series that is absolutely neutral. There are a few, it's more than just the one series. There are a few foggy seascapes, foggy iceberg graveyards that are predominantly one gray. For me, it's just a different tone, language, color pocket. For me, it's all color. Black and white are colors. And Renoir agrees, black is the queen of colors. So if a colorist like that.
Right.
So I've always, paid attention a lot to color. And there's been part of me that's really wanted to work in very saturated color and access those heart rhythms that Rothko sets up that in those fabulous fields of color. Color, I think it was walking by Rothko at the Yale Art Museum while I was going to school. I was railing against modernism, but I just couldn't stop the physical reaction I was having to these canvases, to the color. And it felt like color was playing my body, like an organ plays your body. And I thought, no, there's a lot to learn here, a lot to explore. So I think they access different frequencies, aspects of ourselves, that they can awaken different things.
Yeah.
My experience was that when I photographed in color, the result was an image that kept me a little too close to the real world. I was more interested in getting to essentials, which is in a more abstract dimension. And so the black and white, which eliminates the color from the so-called real world, brings it closer to the essentials. And in that black and white process, I can select out what gives me a deeper view on what I might be photographing. Color in itself is quite beautiful, and I enjoy it for what it is. But for my photographs, my personal real work is, can I abstract enough and can I simplify enough to get to the core of that essentiality in nature? And hence, black and white brings me closer.
It's one of the things I love about working digitally. You can change the color just like a painter. Yeah.
And I love the fact that black and white is really color anyway. Very, very subtle, but it's there.
It's beautiful. So I want to thank you for the story you used to tell, the stories that parents like to embarrass their kids with.
Yeah.
But no, this was really celebrating me. He said, I remember when you were a kid, you came home from school and you had these drawings. You tossed the first one over the table: house, tree, sky, grass, blue sky, red house, green grass. Look what the teacher made me do. And then I tossed the next one over: orange sky, purple grass. I don't know what color the house was. He said, from that moment on, I knew he'd be okay.
Exactly. Look what the teacher made me do. He was aware already that he wanted to do something else.
You guys, I feel like we could be here all day chatting. I'm sorry we have to.
You're gonna have to use a sheep hook whenever you need to do that. It's true, we could.
I love this conversation, and I'm so thankful that we got to have it. There are a lot of more questions, but unfortunately we're running out of time. I got to open up the gallery, and you guys probably need to get some more water. But I thank you. I wanted to remind everybody that's been here that we do have a catalog. That was a question in there, and it's available on my website. So if you go to Obscura Gallery and kind of follow the information along to the show, you will see that you can get the catalog They're on back order at the moment, but we should have more soon. We are going to send out a follow-up to all of you who have been here, and even if you weren't here and you signed up, you will get a follow-up, a PDF of John Paul's and Paul's catalog that you created, right, John Paul?
Yep, the one we showed at the beginning of this, yeah, or similar to it.
And I will also include in this email a link to this virtual tour, because I do realize I'm not sure it's on my website. So for those who want to see the show, stay tuned. I'll send you a link to the virtual tour. And am I missing anything? Oh, the show is on view through November 18th, and actually probably an extra week after that. We may extend it a week. So please come and see the show if you can. And yeah, is there anything else you all want to say before we close that?
I want to say thank you for inviting us. I had a lovely time talking about it, and I was even interested in a few things I remembered and said. So thank you, Jennifer, for the invitation to this Zoom, as you call it.
Yeah, thanks,
My
Jennifer.
pleasure. Thank you guys for being here, and thanks for everybody for showing up, and I hope you all have a great day.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.